Welcome in SODFS Season 2. We are officially back, after a pretty crazy off season and a pretty wild preseason at that. Lots of stuff going on in the NFL. We're just, days away at this point from the week 1 NFL games kicking off. So Nate and I here, getting it back together, getting the gears rolling once again. Gonna walk our way through the entire NFL season, week after week, breaking down some of our favorite DFS plays. But tonight, we're just gonna kind of kick back, walk through our process a little bit, and really just kind of, get in and get ready for the season. Make sure we get our mind right because DFS is a fickle game, and week in and week out, if you're not sharp, it can come back to bite you. But before we get too deep into that, let's go ahead and welcome in my typical co-host here on SODFS, Nate Williams. Nate, what's going on, my brother?
I'm not sure exactly how typical I am, but it's a pleasure to be here with you, Dan, and brother Matt behind the scenes. The off season, I won't lie, there was definitely like a relaxation process, but it's also so good to be back. It's so good to have football back because I'll be honest with you, I was getting a little bit bored. I do love NASCAR. I'm a big NASCAR guy. I do watch NASCAR every Sunday, but there's nothing that compares to football, and there's nothing that compares to NFL DFS. So just for us to be back together, we had the meeting last week, and that was great. But to actually have a real show and be back with our people is it's a great thing, and I'm happy to be here, and it's exciting, man. There's a lot. I wouldn't say there's a lot of NFL relevant news for us to talk about today. We will talk about some things, but the fact that we're back here, drafts are happening. There's a lot of home league drafts that happen very late in the season, so a lot of us are doing our home league drafts. I am a part of XFL 11 with Matthew Berry and Des Bryant. That is a big thing, and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of big hitters in the league I'm in, and I'm getting smoked if I'm being honest with you, but I'm happy to be a part of all of this football season, fantasy football, NFL DFS. It's all great. It just makes me happy.
Yeah, me too, man. Football season really is my DFS that I'm my meat and potatoes of the year. I play year round, whether it be NBA, golf, baseball. Super frustrating. I couldn't be more excited to not have to do baseball anymore than when NFL preseason kicked off, and now college football in the mix between college and NFL. I mean, it's just an influx of slates almost on a nightly basis. So it tis the season, man. SODFS, we are back, and I'm excited.
That's a good point too. I shout out to Dan for his college football lineups over the last year. It's something we never talk about on the show, but this man is 9 times out of 10 cashing, and I don't have the intuity that Dan does as far as college football goes, but Dan's somebody you might want to follow if you want to hit some cash on some college football DraftKings lineups.
Yeah, we tried. I put a few tweets out last year, kind of highlighting some of the plays that I was targeting that given week, and the college football it can be pretty fickle in itself too. It's not as depth chart friendly as these NFL games. You really have to dig in, kind of almost search at each individual team and look up individual reports. That the DraftKings description info for individual players isn't going to do you justice more often than not. So it takes a little bit more digging, but it can be super fun and a great way to find an edge, across your DFS betting.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I watched a lot of college football as a kid. I kind of trailed off once I got married and stuff like that, but I do still follow Michigan football religiously, but I'll have to hit you up as far as making some money goes with college DFS.
Yeah, fantasy points is really taking off in the college football content as well. So, Nate, go ahead and tell the listeners about us being part of the Fantasy Points Media Group.
Yeah. So Sons of Dynasty and Sons of DFS are proud members of the Fantasy Points Media Group. With Fantasy Points, you have access to all of the newest and best websites in the industry for your season-long daily fantasy and NFL betting needs. Access to articles, live streams, podcasts, cheat sheets, Discord, community chat, online tools, and more are available at your fingertips. It's the only subscription you will ever need for the football season. Sign up for the Fantasy Points premium content if you use our promo code Suns22, and you can get 10% off at fantasypoints.com. So be sure to go check it out, because if you ride with Fantasy Points, you'll score more in 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, right now, guys, you can get the NFL Standard subscription at fantasypoints.com for $50 for the season. But with promo code SUNS22, you will get 10% off the CFB Standard. So all college football content coming right to you is $50 as well. That same promo code SUNS22, 10% off. So go check out some of the subscription plans that Fantasy Points has to offer. It is one of the best values in the business. So mixed with some of the greatest content, you really can't go wrong. Highly encourage you guys to go check out fantasypoints.com. Maybe find a subscription plan that works for you and use promo code SUNS22.
Yeah, Fantasy Points put out a tweet today that was actually covering the content from September to October/November, December. And it blew my mind. We're a part of the family, and it still blew my mind. There's 7-8 things a day coming out of Fantasy Points. That's not even including the Fantasy Points media group. So you're talking just relentless content, endless content, more than you can probably consume in your free time. So it's well worth the premium subscription.
All right, Nate, you want to talk a little NFL news before we really get into the bones of the episode?
Yeah, the biggest thing I wanted to talk about for me personally was the Eagles claiming Trey Sermon off waivers from the 49ers. Adam Schefter reported this. It was either yesterday or the day before. I don't remember exactly, but he fills the spot left behind Jalen Reagor. And I don't know if this moves the needle for you, but for me, I was never a big fan. I don't hate the guy or anything like that, but I think that the Eagles, as much as I even don't necessarily want to draft Miles Sanders, I just don't think that it's really going to be effective. If it's me, I don't know, man. I'm kind of rambling, but I just think it's an ineffective move. And I think the 49ers cut him for a reason. And that's a backfield full of backs that they like to use, not efficiently. So I was kind of curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I don't have any Sermon shares really across all platforms, but as far as the opportunity goes, I mean, he seemed like he couldn't get ahead in that 49ers backfield. Well, I mean, this Eagles backfield, you're talking about Miles Sanders, yeah, Kenneth Gainwell. Sanders can't seem to stay healthy. Supposedly he's going to be ready for week 1. And they've been being very cautious with him, but he has been falling down draft boards because of it. Is Gainwell the guy? Maybe not. He seems more like the 2-minute drill passing down specialist. But Sermon potentially could come in and find his way into meaningful touches, and again in an offense that we expect to be great here in 2022. So while I'm not a big believer in Sermon, I don't mind the opportunity, the change of scenery here for the guy that couldn't quite get out of Shanahan's doghouse.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I said, it's all worth reporting because the slightest injury or a change to the backfield could lead to anything. Let me ask you about Ty Johnson. The Texans claimed him off the waivers, former member of the Buccaneers. I do remember us vividly talking about him a few times last year during NFL DFS. The Texans aren't loaded at the wide receiver position. Brandon Cooks is obviously there, and it's a guy that we respect a lot. But, what are your thoughts on Ty Johnson going to the Texans with Nico Collins, Brandon Cooks, and company kind of around?
I don't mind the move. Tyler Johnson's kind of a guy, a deep dynasty dive guy that we've kind of been hoping would catch on, but Tampa Bay keeps basically refreshing that depth chart ahead of him. And finally, now he's going to get moved on and out. And I think the opportunity will be better. Obviously, Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins, the locked in 1-2. But, with John Mechie and the injury that took him out for the season, there's a big opportunity there for the wide receiver 3 on a team that we expect to be trailing off. And, I can paint a picture where Tyler Johnson could be a relevant name this season. And in Dynasty, it's a little boost for him as far as I'm concerned. He wasn't going to prosper with Brady this year. Who knows what quarterback's going to be in Tampa post this season and where it would have lead. At least this year, I think we're going to see a little bit more consistent production out of him. And maybe he'll carve out a meaningful role there for the Texans.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's definitely true. Tom's 45. He's got a lot going on. You know what I mean? As far as Jalen Reagor and the move that the Minnesota Vikings made, I watched this interesting piece where the Minnesota Vikings were thinking that the Eagles were going to draft Justin Jefferson back when they took Justin Jefferson. The Eagles took Jalen Reagor. They laughed. They thought it was funny. Now they're teammates. So what do you make of that? I mean, Jalen Reagor obviously didn't live up to potential in Philadelphia. He's now in Minnesota. Justin Jefferson is obviously somebody that me and you both respectively are big fans of. So what do you make of Jalen Reagor in Minnesota? And obviously this doesn't affect KJ Osborne, correct?
No, absolutely does not affect KJ Osborne. I don't mind the move. Obviously, Reagor, at best, third in the pecking order there, moves over here. While, yes, Justin Jefferson, the locked in 1, Thielen there too, KJ Osborne. I think this is just more of a depth piece. Another weapon there really in the return game in Jalen Reagor. It's a good move for the Vikings. I don't mind it. And, for the Eagles to move on, with egg on their face, obviously, it doesn't really move the needle for me on anybody, though, with the move.
You say the Eagles move on with egg on their face, but I think this is a great move. The Eagles are obviously, and I think, in my opinion, and I hate to speak for you, but I also think that you might agree with A.J. Brown in town and Devontae Smith. We're both obviously big fans of them. I know Reagor wasn't a threat to their targets, but it just clears the way and just makes everything better for everybody. For me, I'm fucking static about the move, to be honest with you, man. I mean, I love what Philadelphia is doing. Send him to Minnesota. It's in my Lions division, but we're not talking about that tonight, so it is what it is.
Well, I think that's pretty much it for the recent news anyway. I'm sure we will get more over the course of the next week as we really start to dive in for week 1. Nate, but before we even get to talk about any week 1 guys, we were going to use tonight's episode to kind of just rehash some of the scoring settings, advantages, and maybe other areas when playing DFS that you can find an edge. In today's game, there's a lot of sharp guys playing, and, getting to these, $1 million to first place tournaments and expecting to have an ROI week in and week out can be difficult. So, finding ways to target different tournaments and maybe not shooting for the moon quite as high, it can really help you build that bankroll. We're going to talk about some different angles in which you can attack that tonight.
Yeah, I basically, my idea for the show was for it to be an opportunity for you and I to sit down and kind of talk through our strategy process and kind of explain to the listeners how we approach every week. DFS can be a very humbling, and it can be frustrating too. There's going to be plenty more weeks that you don't hit expectations compared to when you hit some decent amount of money that makes you happy, or you have a big week. Basically, it's not going to always be this thing where it's not going to be for most people a full-time job and an opportunity to just win every week, basically. So me and Dan wanted to talk about how we kind of approach every week, the system that we take, how we maintain winning enough money to build our bankroll, and how we basically are able to sustain without taking out of our wallets, which is it's a big thing for, most of us normal folks, so to speak. So what we're going to talk about right now is basically the difference between Fanduel and DraftKings, how the scoring process works, because they are very two different platforms, even though they're both NFL DFS centric platforms, so to speak. So with both sites, both do require one quarterback, two running backs, three wide receivers, a tight end, and at least one flex and one DST. 1 point is awarded per 25 passing points to the quarterback, 1 point per 10 rushing yards. That is both, quarterback, running back, wide receiver. 4 points per passing touchdown and 6 points per rushing and receiving touchdown. So this scoring system is essentially what makes, for I think me and most NFL DFS players, I don't want to speak for Dan, but makes stacking lucrative for either cash, which is basically head-to-heads, or GPPs, which is tournaments, because if you're playing Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown, you're essentially getting far more points for the quarterback throwing the touchdown and AJ Brown receiving a touchdown, versus just two random guys. When you jump to FanDuel, it's a little bit different. That is a half PPR setting. FanDuel is different than DraftKings in that way. It allows a maximum also of 4 players per team, which is quite different than DraftKings. DraftKings is full PPR. They allow 7 players per team, which is 3 more, obviously, and they award 3 points extra for 300 passing yards, an extra 3 points for 100 rushing yards, and an extra 3 points for 100 receiving yards, which is honestly a pretty big deal. And that's why I lean to DraftKings. I do like the variables in the DFS play. It could make it tougher. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's more fun for me personally. FanDuel is definitely more touchdown heavy scoring system, while DraftKings rewards players who rack up receptions and yardage. So the salary systems definitely range widely between the two sites, and that's with NFL, MLB, NBA, NASCAR. Everything is definitely different. So I'm more of a DraftKings guy. Dan, what are your thoughts on kind of which platform you prefer and the scoring settings, and what draws you to which one and why?
I am 100% DraftKings pretty much. I have dabbled with FanDuel, but even the simplicity of the PPR format that DraftKings offers, across all my dynasty leagues, my redraft leagues, PPR is essentially the standard at this point. So, just getting to take everything that I'm soaking in from a redraft and dynasty perspective across PPR leagues, following that, through those leagues, just having those guys now on my mind constantly throughout the season, that just makes it so much easier of a transition right over to DraftKings. If I like a guy for the target volume he's going to see in my PPR Dynasty League, well, guess what? That transitions right on over into DraftKings in a PPR scoring setting. So DraftKings by far has been my favorite of the two. But, as you mentioned, with the pricing discrepancies, there might be times where Alvin Kamara is priced appropriately on DraftKings, but for whatever reason on FanDuel, any given week, he could be far below. Yes, the PPR aspect of it coming into effect there, but other than that, I don't really see a ton of reason or difference. It's dealer's choice as far as I'm concerned. You might like one platform or another, just based off of the user flow, the experience as a whole, and the scorings itself might not even matter to you. So just pick and choose whichever one you're comfortable with, whichever one you feel like you understand. The contest, make sure you're checking these contests out, understanding the payout structure, understanding the amount of entries that you can put in, the amount of entries that the field has as a whole. So I think that's a lot more important than even the scoring settings when it comes to choosing which site you prefer.
Yeah, big shout out to DraftKings customer service department. I'm not going to say anything about FanDuels, but I'm going to leave it at that, so. As far as our research process goes, Dan, this is something that is more in depth than most people probably understand. I mean, it doesn't take up all of your day every day of the week, but it is an every day of the week process. No doubt about it. Any DFS player knows that. I've seen Bo in the comments. Shout out to Bo. He 100% understands this. As far as the beginning of the week goes, Dan, how do you evaluate? I mean, we're both big fantasy football players, no matter what. So, I mean, it goes hand in hand. So, we're paying attention to the news. But how does the beginning of the week roll for you in terms of fantasy football and more importantly, NFL DFS?
The beginning of the week really kind of starts with, the review aspect of it. Yes, throughout the day and as the contests are finishing up, even into the evenings and on some slates, I'm checking out, seeing where my lines finished and kind of seeing which guys were there. But ultimately, once all the contests are over, the next day, I like to go back and look at individual contests, see what the optimal lineup was, and see, reverse engineer that build, kind of see what the guy was thinking, potentially that he had a late swap in there, and just try and get into the mind of that winning lineup, and potentially even the second place lineup, and it's almost like a movie playing out when you can see the differences in those two lines, and that these two guys were sweating it there at the end when you see that one guy that they needed, the other guy had. That review process can really shine a bunch of lights on what went right for us or what went wrong, and being able to highlight that aspect. It's basically all the answers to the test at this point. It's done. Everybody turned in their tests. Well, here's the answers, and you can really kind of reverse what you did as far as your building process going into the week, and really just illuminate the things that you think you did right or the things that you might want to improve on the following week.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, is that you have to evaluate yourself each week. You cannot just play NFL DFS and then not make any money and then write it off as it was a shit week. Essentially, you have to evaluate where you went wrong, the mistakes you made, and if you don't, you will never ever get better.
Yeah, you can't simply win or lose. A lot of guys, oh, I didn't cash, I don't even care, on to the next build, and I get that, but at the same time, you've now lost out on information because you were trying to build a perfect puzzle, and your puzzle pieces didn't fit. You flopped, but you don't even care what the answer was. You just moved on to the next puzzle, and that's not how you get better at the next one. You really need to understand what you did wrong and what you could have done right. So the review process is very important each and every week, and it's a must do for us here on SODFS.
It's literally about how much information you can gather. For me, I love that. How does midweek look for you, man? How does Wednesday look?
Wednesday is typically, when the injury reports start rolling around, so we kind of get to see a little bit of insight into the statuses of players. Maybe a guy pops up with a questionable tag at this point, and what does that mean for the pieces around him if he were to miss, or if he's potentially heading into the week questionable. You may either A, have an easy fade there, or B, that could be presenting an edge for you on a guy who might be lower owned than he possibly should be, just given to the questionable nature. So seeing those first glimpses at the injury report can really kind of help get some insight, maybe find something that we can take advantage of as far as when creating those builds. Maybe cast a little bit of doubt. Somebody that has a questionable tag all week long very well may be lower owned versus somebody who it just popped up later in the week.
Yeah, I love all that. And the same goes for the rest of the week. It just gets more crucial as each day of the week goes on. As Friday comes, game status reports come out. They're released in the afternoon. You see which players are out, which players are questionable, and which players might not even play on the weekend. So Friday is a big day. Saturday, roster moves are due by 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's both of our time zones. So if a player is questionable, his availability may be revealed. If his team calls up a player from the same position on their practice squad, it doesn't happen, necessarily quite often, but it does happen in the NFL. And by knowing who's more likely to be in and out on their roster moves, you have a head start on Sunday news. And then Sunday is the big day. Sunday is a day, Dan, you've talked about since the first episode we've had. National reports reporters. We got Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, all them guys, even some of our friends, some of the guys that aren't at the top networks, they're tweeting news, inactives, actives, early Sunday morning, 90 minutes before each game starts. Teams are absolutely required to release inactive reports. And then after the 1 p.m. game starts, but before the 4 p.m. games begin, check your lineups, check your contests for late swap possibilities. This is something Dan has been telling you for the better part of the last 18 months. The information gathered from the early games can make or break you in your GPPs.
Yeah, absolutely. You get a peek into, given the contest that you're in, you get a peek into your ownerships across your first 4 players that were playing in the earlier games. And if they're relatively low, you could maybe play it a little bit more conservative with your later guys. Or if if one of these running backs that you thought was going to be lower owned ends up being, the second highest owned running back on the slate, turns out to be straight chalk. And the only way you're going to be able to salvage this lineup is to get freaky there in the late game. So always having that ability to stay water, get a little bit more information about the puzzle that you're trying to put together, and potentially really just kind of change the game there later on by going to a guy that nobody was on. And while yes, it's unlikely to hit, that's what it's going to take, because you played a running back that's sitting there at 28% rostered across there. You're not going to get anywhere on the back of him, riding him, playing it safe with another guy that's 15%. You need to get all the way down into sub 3% category to even have a shot to get into those top 5 payout spots.
Yeah, that was a nice transition. Dan nailed it there. And speaking of highly rostered players and the way you structure your rosters, it's far more important than who you pick. And also, you got to think about which tournaments. If you're entering GPPs and tournaments, you have to think about which ones you're entering. I think all of us want to be rich. I think all of us want to be successful. And I think all of us want to make it big and say we hit the big one. But the fact of the matter is if you tend to look at these things, my buddy Garage Guy Chase, actually over at Garage Guys FS, actually said this about NASCAR DFS earlier today. He said if you lower your expectations and you think about it being a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but still approaching it every week as you can hit that, it'll change your outlook on sports betting and NASCAR DFS. And he's 100% freaking right. You can't look at this as a career necessarily, as I'm going to quit my day job and I'm going to play DFS and get rich. But there are ways that you can profit every week, build your bankroll, not pay out of your pocket to play these stupid things, and we're going to talk about that right now. So setting rosters and picking what you hope is the perfect team is fun, but deciding which GPPs to enter, as we said, is a crucial part of winning. Deciding which tournament center is the best part of it. So I want to talk real quick about a very, very, very well-written thread by Joe Holka of at the Joel Holka Show on Twitter. He posted this thread a few days ago. Dan and I both follow Joe. He is a great NFL DFS follow. He is a very, very smart individual. And we're going to jump into a couple of the things that he mentioned that we think will help you win some money this year.
Yeah, he just kind of went in on this thread. It was maybe 4 or 5 days ago, but it talks about how you don't need to be perfect to win. Fewer opponents' lineups almost always leads to a lower first place score. And it kind of just gets into what we mentioned earlier as far as when you get into these huge GPP tournaments, the $10 entry for $125K to first place or bigger, $500,000, whatever it may be, these huge tournaments, you really have to put together a banger of a lineup, and not just a banger of a lineup that nobody else has. Finding these sub 5, sub 3% guys, the guys that everybody was fading, and instead of fading that play along with everybody else, you lean into it and you get a guy that has a 40-point ceiling on a 20% basis at sub 3% ownership, and bam, you're in the big money there. Finding those edges and finding a way to really kind of see what the field is doing, get a process on what the field is doing, and finding those guys that have that ability to really reach that high ceiling. But maybe this past week they flopped, and now the next week everybody's scared to touch them. That's how you get a CMC at sub 5, or a Derrick Henry at sub 3% on a given week where he happens to break an entire slate. So those are the opportunities that you're looking for.
I think that's something that we're all guilty of at some point, whether it's every week or just in general. Maybe a couple of years ago when you first started playing NFL DFS, is that we all look for this perfect lineup, that's going to make us get rich. But Joe points out in this lineup and in his thread that, it's not necessarily about getting rich. It's about building that bankroll and building your opportunity, because the more money you have in your bank, the bigger tournaments you can enter and the better opportunity that you in fact have at making more money. Because, when you enter these GPPs, we talked about this on last year's NFL DFS Basics show. Myself personally, I like the single entries. I'm a big fan of single entries and the 3 max entries. I've had my most success in them, whether it's NFL, NBA, MLB, or NASCAR. I've had my most success in them, and every time I've taken down a GPP, it has been in a 3 max entry or a single entry. So when you do that, you're able to you're lowering your odds against playing not only against sharks but against guys that are entering, generated lineups off of generators and stuff like that. But Joe points out something that I never thought of is you're able to stack more, and because the percentages are lower of who you're playing against, you can stack. DraftKings allows you to stack 5, 6, 7 guys, so you can stack 3, 4. You can stack quarterback, 2 wide receivers, running back. A lot of us think, when we think of that, we think we're taking away from the own guys we're playing. But Joe makes a good point in this thread that you can play, 5 guys from the Los Angeles Rams. If they're going to score a ton of points, you want that exposure. And that's a great opportunity in a 3 max entry, because the guys you're playing against are just the odds are basically lower, that they're going to hit big against you. So I really love this thread. It was something that really hit home with me. And he even said he was bullish to begin with, at the beginning of when he started playing NFL DFS, and it hit home with me so bad. And I just kind of wanted to share it with you guys. And Dan, I was kind of curious on your thoughts. We've talked 3 max entries. We've talked single GPPs many a times on our shows, but what are your thoughts on stacking, say more than 3 guys in an NFL DFS lineup? Are you open to that? How does that make you feel? And I mean, obviously it's probably makes you a little nervous, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think stacking is obviously beneficial across multiple fantasy platforms, but as far as DFS goes, I think stacking is good. And another thing though is a lot of people don't think of stacking QBs and running backs. And Scott Barrett pointed out in an article a couple weeks ago that the correlation between a QB1 and an RB1 for the same team is actually pretty high. It came in, I think it was like 35% or something. It was almost even better than the wide receiver one, which I thought was unique. So finding little edges like that, ways to stack and get different. No, I'm not typically looking to get a QB and 3 receiving options for that same QB. But, if it's a Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and, I can get Hayden Hurst at the tight end minimum that week, I'm not afraid to do that, potentially with 1 or 2 bringbacks. There's, again, Scott Barrett just released an article maybe 2 weeks ago at this point that went over the correlation between all these positions and building these stacks and what correlates well. And that was the main thing that I took away from it, is that too many guys building lineups are not having a running back and an RB1 and a QB1 from the same team in their stacks. And that's an edge that I think I'm going to try to exploit a little bit more this year, finding that guy, especially DK. If you can get that running back with the receiving upside, the guy that we believe is going to get the receiving work on any given week. Maybe it's a week that we're expecting this team to trail. Well, not only getting that QB1 with a different receiving option, but running it back with the RB1 from the same team, finding different ways to get a little bit different with your stacks this year. I think it's going to be a priority for me.
Yeah, big shout out to Scott Barrett and Fantasy Points. They have a ton of great content coming out. Scott made a very good point. It was something we even mentioned last year during our shows, was stacking quarterbacks and running backs. I think last year it was during, I don't remember exactly, but this year what stands out to me is the Green Bay Packers situation with Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones. Oh, it's something I'm so hot on right now, and I'm just excited for the season to kick off, man. As far as stacking those two go, because Alan Lazard's there, and that's perfectly fine and all, but I think Aaron Jones is going to be a big part of that offense. Aaron Rodgers is still an MVP level quarterback. Don't care what nobody says. I'm just stoked to see how it all unfolds. There's plenty of examples of that. We got Russell Wilson in Denver, Javonte Williams. It's just, I think this is going to be a unique year for NFL DFS. I really, truly believe it's going to be a year like we haven't seen before. So I'm just so damn excited, man. We got another week to go before the season actually kicks off, but it's looking very, very promising.
I'm excited. I'm looking to hit big this year. I'm looking to quit my day job. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. I mean, who's with me? Who wants to quit their day job this year? I'm unlacing my boots. I'm gonna kick them off. SODFS, DraftKings. I'm in the office right now.
Is your office
It's a revolution.
Moving? I'm just curious.
It's a revolution. My office is moving. Yeah, Brown Studios is going to be taking it south, closer down to Atlanta. Going back home to the original stomping grounds. We've been up here in the country for a while now, but we are ready to get back to civilization, get the kids back into a respectable educational system, and really try to blossom the next chapter of our life down there, a little bit closer to Atlanta. So we're excited about that. That's coming up in about 3 weeks. So after a couple of weeks in of SODFS, week 1, week 2, maybe even week 3, Brown Studios will be looking different. We have officially closed contract on the new house. We get the keys on the 16th. So, Browns are going to be packing up and heading south. And I'm excited about it, man. I'm stoked.
As much as I wish that I could say that the Browns are going to the Super Bowl, I can't. But obviously, that I'm very happy for you. Brother Matt's very happy for you, and the rest of the SOD crew, including, Craig, Devin, Beezy. We'll even throw Linda in because we love her. We all are very happy for you, man. It's going to be cool. You will see his background changing. There will probably be a rest stop, possibly in the next week or two. But, we're going to bring you the same quality content as we do every week. We're very excited about this year. It's going to be a different season. I promise you that. SODFS is pumped, and we're ready to rock and roll. Is there anything you want to say, Dan, before I take it into some of the closing segments?
I think that's pretty much it, man. You can get ready to wrap us up here. I think we're going to really just kind of hone in and get ready for week 1. I've already started kind of highlighting some guys, got a couple of lineups built, but it's all too early at this point. I'm just kind of getting ahead of myself. There's a lot of juicy plays for week 1. I think sorting through it and figuring out projections as far as the ownerships go is going to be really pivotal for these GPP tournaments, because there's some juicy plays as of right now.
Yeah, they're all going to change up to the last second too, like right up to that last minute on that last Sunday. So I will say this: once again, Sons of Dynasty, Sons of DFS, we are proud members of Fantasy Points Live Media Group. With Fantasy Points, you have access to the newest and best website in the industry for your season-long daily fantasy and NFL betting needs. Access to articles, live streams, podcasts, cheat sheets. The Discord is free, by the way. Community chat, online tools. All of them are available at your fingertips. It's the only subscription you'll ever need this football season. Sign up for Fantasy Points premium content. Use our promo code SUNS22. You'll get 10% off. Save a little bit of money. Go check it out, because if you ride with Fantasy Points in 2022, you'll score more in 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, Nate, Scott Barrett just today released his 96 stats article, came out on fantasypoints.com right there. It's 96 statistics across the league covering all 32 teams and the fantasy implications that ride with it. You can check it out right now at fantasypoints.com. Use that promo code to save yourself 10%.
It was beautiful. I read it, honestly, on the clock, but we won't talk about that. Beyond that, follow, subscribe. Dynasty Sons, we're on Twitter. Follow us there, please. Facebook, we're there too. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Subscribe to us there. We're going to have a lot of content coming your way this season. Sons of DFS plus more. Please, a subscription means more to us than anything. So we love everybody that supports us. Brother Matt, I love you. You do a lot of work behind the scenes. We say this every week for the last 18 months, but without you, this show doesn't run. Thank you so much for what you do. Dan, I love you. I wish I was there to help you with your move. The rest of the SOD crew, Rusty, Beezy, Craig, Linda, everybody, we love you guys. Dan, take us out. Let's rock and roll next week.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Echoing every last thing that you just said. This is just the beginning. The season is here. Week 1, just around the corner. Buckle up and let's ride. Much love to everybody out there.
Love y'all.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Hell no, man. Y'all done up and done it.
Snappy Root.